Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome in to this special edition of the Intentional Encourager podcast, the People Buy From People series. I'm your host, Brian Sexton, and I have a unbelievable friend of mine that is one of the endorsers of this book. She is the president of Knowbility Consulting, and you can find her on LinkedIn at Lori Knudsen, Knudsen. Now, the first time I had her on the Intentional Encourager podcast, I completely butchered the spelling of her name, and I had to go back and do a big mea culpa. But this book would not be the same without her. Behind the scenes, she is an intentional encourager. There were times that she would text and say, "Hey, I'm encouraging you," and that is so key when you're doing a project like this. But this book wouldn't have been the same without her. And it is an honor to have Lori Knudsen, my dear friend, Lori Knudsen, here on this special edition of the Intentional Encourager podcast, the People Buy From People series. Lori, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. How could I not be after that introduction? I'm just like, okay, I'm done for the day.
Every time I see you and we get together, it's like a warm blanket around me. I mean, you have such impact on people like that. And I've said it to you privately, so now I'm going to say it to you publicly. You are a rock star. You have such a way of making people feel important. And I want to start there in our conversation. You had a lot of years in sales, so a lot of these principles resonated with you. And we talked about that before I was writing, and I asked you to be a part of the book. And you and I have had a bunch of conversations about your sales career and things like that. And we talked about it when you were on the Intentional Encourager podcast before. I asked you to cover meekness because, to me, that's what you are, the embodying of on LinkedIn. Every post that I see from you is always just trying to help somebody and lift somebody and encourage somebody. And it's inspiring. It really is. When you think about your transformation, making that move from your strong sales career to now being focused on your business and truly helping people understand their strengths and things like that, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of the word meekness?
I mean, I think I told you offline that originally when I first heard the word meekness and you wanted me to review this chapter, when I was going back, when I read it, then it's a different context, but I would think of it as weakness. And you do a really good job of explaining that throughout this chapter and really how it's a strength. I never considered myself meek, but yet I think one of the things I've learned, and I do say learned, it's coming through maturity and emotional intelligence and working with clients and customers in the field, sales, is really, taking a step back and doing what's best for them, being an advocate. And when I was transitioning from sales to, being a solopreneur, something that I didn't, necessarily plan, but it became, when I decided to take this route, this was the means and the way that I was able to do it. And it was a transition, it was difficult for me. And, there weren't the accolades, there wasn't the recognition, it was all like the motivation really has to come from within. And I think that that's where really focusing on my core values and principles of what matters to me. And, this is a long-winded answer to what meekness means, but I think, for me, it's just, it really is solidified every time I work with a client, help a client, have a conversation with someone. I know I'm on the right path. I know I'm where I'm supposed to be. And, maybe I haven't even arrived at my final destination yet, but this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, and I'm jotting some notes down because you said a lot of really good things there. And where I want to go is in sales or in leadership, a lot of times people will strive for the recognition, the accolades, the what's in it for me, the bonus, the things like that, all the different things that equate to value, tangible value. But I
Mhm.
love what you said there a minute ago about the motivation for you being from within and focusing on your core values and your core strengths. And then when working with your clients, getting them to realize and understand what their core strengths and values and principles are. Take me through the transition. You mentioned the transition from sales to being a solopreneur. What was the biggest obstacle point that you had to overcome within yourself to make that transition smoothly? Because again, and this is a long-winded question, so don't feel bad about a long-winded answer.
Well,
The
I can give a long-winded answer, so
I love it. No, I love it because there's always a lot of wisdom there, Lori. And again, I think that people when they make a transition like you did, and we talked about this before we started recording, the difference between a front-facing person, and that's why I wrote the chapter, was to get front-facing people to understand whether in leadership or ministry or, the dominant spouse in a marriage or something like that, is that when you're a front-facing person, I've been a front-facing person, it's hard sometimes to step back and be humbly docile. Take me through that transition that you had to make in your own life, going from that front facing person to going, I'm going to help people get better in their own lives.
yeah, that is a big one. Truly the biggest obstacle was me, my mindset, and really just believing in myself and like even when I worked in sales before I was familiar with the term servant leadership, I always talked about being an advocate for my clients, for my customers, because I felt like I was there in service of them. And I also did sales training. And originally, when I was downsized the last time, I envisioned, transitioning over to a training role. I'd never really thought about working one on one. Then I met Kristen Sherry, who in fact was my coach. And throughout a lot of conversations and things that transpired, I was like, you know what? I think that this is really the direction I want to go. And it took me a while to really narrow down who specifically I wanted to help. And I know that this was a conversation I had multiple times with Kristen, because you want to help everybody, and you can't. You can help everybody a little, but it's hard. And so a lot of my first year or two was really hit or miss. I mean, I just was really kind of feeling it out. And I guess growing into the position, figuring out what lights me up, where I'm most excited, and really where and who I can impact the most. And, that's where I've arrived at, working with high school students, college students. And then I still do work with adults in transition. I actually get a lot I don't advertise, or I mean, I don't know that I advertise, but you know what I mean? I don't
Yeah.
really post about that as much, but yet I get a lot of referrals for that. And so if they're a good fit, then yes, I work with them. If not, I refer them to one of the many other coaches that I know that are phenomenal. And then, of course, corporate workshops, although since COVID, I really haven't done a lot of team building, but they all kind of still feed that. My top values are love and connection to others. That's family and friends. I've got relating strengths. I want I feed off of people in that conversation and that dynamic, and then making a difference. A lot of people, I don't think anybody says, oh, I don't want to make a difference. But for me, having one of my top strengths be responsibility, I feel kind of almost psychologically bound to it. What I say I'm going to do, to my detriment sometimes. So it's, because I've had to learn to kind of say, good is good enough. Like there's a point where, especially with coaching, you're there as the guide, like the outcome is ultimately on the client and the customer. You can give them the tools, you can give them the information, but what they do with that is out of your hands. That was one of the hardest things to learn, and just kind of have to step back. It's like kids, like you can talk to them and have conversations and you hope that they do the right thing, but ultimately they're going to do it. And you just have to be there to support them or help them through whatever it is, and guide them. And it's the same way. So, I mean, it's really just been kind of an evolution of Lori and figuring out who I am as a coach, who I want to work with. And, really now I think COVID was, in some ways it gave me the time to really dig deep and reflect and think about that I may not have otherwise had. Not that I would like to do that over, but I mean, trying to find the positive in everything. I think that I'm grateful for that time to really, reflect and be confident in my direction.
No, that's good. Let's step aside, take a quick break. When we come back, I want to park on something you said there a minute ago in regards to meekness and the difference in working with high school and college students versus adults. And there's a word we're going to use that's a word in meekness that is a vast difference. Sometimes there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences as well. Come back with us. My good friend Lori Knudsen joins me today talking about meekness on this special edition of the Intentional Encourager podcast, the People Buy From People series. Back in a moment.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton here. I want to tell you about our sponsor, SEO National. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. Now what's that, you might say? Well, search engine optimization helps you show up higher on search engines in front of paying customers for words that you as a business owner can monetize. What a great concept. SEO National is owned by my good buddy Damon Burton, who's been a guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Not only has Damon and his team worked with businesses of all sizes, from e-commerce startups to NBA teams and Shark Tank featured businesses, but more importantly, Damon and his team are about transparency, trust, and providing lifetime value. So much so that he still has his first customers after opening SEO National 14 years ago. Let me give you some intentional encouragement and call Damon and his team today at 855-736-6285 or go to www.seonational.com and get a free quote.
Lori, you were talking about working with high school kids and college students, and then still working with some adults. Mm-hmm. And there is, so the first thing I'll say is this: you look, to deal with people like that on a daily basis, you have kept yourself much better than I have. I have to use product on my beard so the gray will not come out. There's flecks of gray in my hair. I have a 20-year-old junior at Marshall University, and it's like, this may be the death of me beforehand. I may not get to grandkids. And here you are looking stunning and fabulous. And I know you have teenagers and young adults of your own because we've had those conversations. But here's where I want to go. Okay, beyond your beauty secrets. And then maybe, beyond that.
I'll give you the name of my hairstylist.
Hey, yeah. Well, if they can do something with this right here, yeah, it's And I go to a stylist, and this is the best that, you know, this is
Hey,
all she's got to work
there's no
with.
shame, no shame in hair color. I don't.
Amen, sister. Preach. Yes, that's right. But there is a difference. Here's what I've noticed about my young adult son and adults. And it's one definition of meekness. And that is one definition, and it was an eye-opener for me. It was humbly patient.
Mhm.
My son is not patient. And I think it's our generation of having everything instantaneously at their fingertips. And them talking about, you know, my son, when he buys a video game, he immediately wants to conquer that thing within the first night. And so yeah, it's and it is I don't know if it's a generational thing, if it is if it's something that their world brings to them and says you need to be really good really quick. When you work with high school students and college students, how do you explain the value of patience to them and how it works in their life as a strength? Is that kind of am I asking the question right? Is that?
Yeah. I'm trying to think because it's, it's different each time, honestly, because it depends on their personality. I mean, you're right that I think because of technology and the world that we live in, everything is instant, right? We just have access to everything. I mean, we can Google, we can, look anything up, and we can send messages, and everything's instantaneous. Whereas picking a career path, interviewing for a job, all the things that you're doing, or even in college and working for, there's not shortcuts. There's shortcuts or better ways to learn how to study. There's shortcuts in ways to create templates for thank you notes, or cover letters, or whatever the case might be. But they're really, you can't get around that, and you have to do it. I mean, I can remember even not that long ago, the first time I was downsized, and I was like, you mean I've got to change my resume for each job I apply for, to match, like not like you're changing and putting things on there that aren't true, but if their wording, if you're a territory manager and they're asking for a sales specialist or whatever, you want to customize, and you basically role map each line item. And and I talk about things like that particularly with college students when they're interviewing for internships or interviewing for roles after graduation. They do get frustrated, and I'm like, but here's the beauty of that. If you start doing this now, you're miles ahead of a lot of the adults out there. I mean, it's all about standing out and making an impression. It's just getting them to remember you. And how do you do that? I mean, it's obviously your skills and what you've learned, but especially for a college student, I mean, they might have an internship, but they don't have a lot of experience. So really connecting their lessons learned and things like patience. I mean, employers hear that and they're like, wow, because that really speaks to emotional intelligence. And
I've got to jump in here. You are really digging deep on a couple of things that are just really important about the power of meekness. And I didn't realize it until I was doing research on that chapter, because the reason I wanted to write that chapter, Lori, was because I wanted to when I was writing people buy from people, it was starting out to be a sales book. And I began to think of the people that I worked with and sold against that I just thought were arrogant. They were just like, oh my goodness. And I thought those times that I have stepped back and put myself in the background was the times that I stood out the most to my customers. When I let them take the lead and I stepped back and walked beside them and I hear so many people say you have to lead a customer to a buying decision. You have to lead this person, and especially in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I say to them, if you're leading, you're pulling rather than walking alongside. And I don't know anyone that if they don't want to move are going to let anyone pull them in a certain direction. Like if I plant my feet and I stay still, it doesn't matter if somebody is pulling my arm to move me forward. I'm not going anywhere. But if we're walking side by side and we're walking arm in arm, we're walking in the same direction. And that's why I wrote the chapter. You said something, and I wrote this down, and I've never heard it said this way, and it's beautiful. Patience depends on personality. I've never heard that, and it's brilliant, and I knew it would be brilliant because you said it. I knew it would be brilliant. Why do you think young people and young adults and most people that you work with, why don't they tap into more of that patience part of their personality and really hone that in and work on that as a skill? Or is it something that can be taught? I mean, I know life teaches us patience, but what do you see?
I mean, it's hard because, again, I don't think it's something, like you said, that's really discussed much. We talk about, patience being a virtue and, just practicing that. But then we're also hearing these messages like, if you want something, you got to make it happen. And I do believe that. I do believe that, we shouldn't depend on someone else paving our own career path, because if we don't have a vision for it, we're going to be living and working someone else's vision of what that is. But with personality and strengths, I mean, there's some people, like if you have someone that's strong and has activator in their top strength, they're the kind of the joke or the saying is, instead of ready, aim, fire, they're, ready, fire, aim. They're just ready to go. Like whatever idea it is, they just want to go. They want to start it. They want to do it. But then they need to partner with someone who's, more deliberative or responsible, that is going to see that project through, because they're great at getting going, great at getting teams going. And it's not a bad strength. I mean, like every strength kind of has what we call a shadow side, where either how it can be perceived by others or when we overuse it ourselves, that when we have that awareness, it makes a big difference. So like someone that has activator, for example, knowing that they're ready to pull the trigger, it's like, okay, let's hit the pause button. Let's think about this, like, do I have everything I need?
Well, Lori, you make a great point there. The activator, a lot of times, is that person is just so dominant in their thinking. They're like, I am not letting anything get in my way. I'm not going to, patience is not a virtue. I should have this should have been done 5 minutes ago, or it should have been done yesterday. and it's that mode of I'm plowing through, and you're either with me or you're against me. And a lot of times people that exhibit weakness, or meekness as a strength, I should say, and not a weakness, but meekness as a strength, people that have the activator strength a lot of times will look at them and say, you're in my way. You're stopping me from doing what I want to do, instead of trying to your point, call on them, because maybe that person that is humbly patient has surveyed the landscape and goes, but you're going to have a problem right over here.
Mm-hmm.
If you do what you're going to do, you're going to have a problem and it's going to be right over here. And it could be a fatal problem. Like this could be devastating. You really need to watch that. And I love what you said about the what our society comes at people with is like, grow your network, grow your platform, grow this, side hustle, do this, do that. I think a lot of times what I admire about meek people is they have the patience to sit back and let the dust clear, right? And just move. I love, go take that, if you will. I want you to talk about having the patience to let the dust settle, because I know at times in your life, you've had to sit in those moments where you kind of had to let the dust settle and then go and make decisions about what's best. And you mentioned working with Kristen. We love Kristen. She is amazing. She is absolutely the best. But let's go there for just a quick second. When you were having to let the dust settle, transitioning and deciding to be a solopreneur, what did you learn from sitting back and letting the dust settle?
I'm not a very patient person. I mean, like 20-year-old me was like instant. It's like get mad or upset. The good thing is I get over it quickly. It's like, I don't hold it in, which is healthier, but I'm not like, I've learned to be a more patient person. And because I am not just by my natural personality and tendencies, it's something that I've worked really hard on. And that's been the hardest thing is I think when and I've second guessed myself, honestly. I mean, I think everybody does, but I keep going back to, okay, should I keep doing this? Am I on the, like, I know I enjoy it, but, does it make sense? Should I, be doing something else? But, rather than continuing to work on building, my business and working with others. And I just know that it's one of those things where when you have a plan or a process, if it's solid, then you continue to work that plan and process. And that's something that over this, year, especially, but even like part of last year, I started working with our friend David Massover. And, going back to the fact that, he asked me a question about my sales process. And I was like, oh, yeah, I got a process. It's like, yeah. You know how those questions went, right?
Yeah.
And it's really thinking about, how, you're guiding that customer. And I mean, I think it is really because, if you've read Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, and which I had kind of sort of read it. I didn't like read it. I have now read it thoroughly because David commanded me to do so. But the customer is the hero and you're the guide walking them through that journey. And that's always been my philosophy, but really getting granular and thinking about those steps to make sure has required a lot of patience, a lot. I mean, and it's still like, it was a lot of back and forth. And I was just like, oh, come on. Is it not right yet? Please just give me something, tell me it's, I felt like when I was pregnant and I never dilated at every checkup, and I'm like, just lie to me. I don't care. Just tell me I'm dilated, like, 1 centimeter or something.
Well, and I want to, and I mentioned that, yeah, I'm walking through that with my dear sweet wife when we had our child. Let's step aside and take a break real quick because I want to park on that for just a minute. There, you hit on something again, Lori. You're just dropping wisdom here this morning, and I'm so appreciative. Let's step aside, take a break. We'll be back in just a moment on this special edition of the Intentional Encourager podcast, the People Buy From People series with Lori Knudsen. Back in a moment. Hey, everybody, Brian Sexton. Want to tell you about my new book, People Buy From People, 10 Powerful People Lessons from the ultimate people person, my dad. My dad was one of the greatest connectors that I ever knew. And he shared with me 10 connecting principles that I have used throughout my 25-year sales and sales management, customer engagement, and leadership career that I'm passing along to you. If you want to be a stronger, deeper, and more powerful connector, you've got to pick up a copy of People Buy from People. There are concepts in there that you may not realize help make you a power connector. You can go to Amazon and pick it up, Kindle if you're an e-reader and you like to do it that way, or now available on Audible. And there's one other way you can get a copy of People Buy from People. You can get one from me and I'll sign it for you. You go to intentionalmediaandpublishing@gmail.com and send me an email, and I'll share with you the link on how you can get a signed copy. You can buy a signed copy directly from me. Again, People Buy from People. If you want to connect like never before, pick up your copy today of People Buy from People. And now let's get back to more great conversation here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. You hit on something really good there. And that is when I was walking through, and I don't know that I talked about it in the book much. I don't know when I'll really get into detail, but when I was walking through a job loss, and that's when I met Kristen, I wanted to be working. I wanted to be, and somebody may be listening to this today that we're recording when it comes out that is in that same boat. Like, I want to be back to work. I want things to be back to normal. Because I fought through that myself. I longed for normalcy.
Mm-hmm.
I craved normalcy. And you mentioned when you were having one of your children, I was praying one morning, and I was reminded of the fact that the night we found out that she was pregnant with our son was awesome. And from that minute on, we loved him. And every ultrasound, and we were excited, like we can't wait till he gets here. But if we had said the minute she got pregnant, okay, send him now, we're ready, send him now. There's not that time for him to develop and grow and all the things that have to happen inside of a woman's body for that baby to develop in the way that baby needs to develop so that they're healthy when they're born. And that doesn't ensure that children, I mean, our challenge, my son was born 5 weeks prematurely, and he's dealt with asthma issues throughout his life. But again, he wasn't born at 24 weeks, or he wasn't born at 28 weeks. And again, there are success stories. I'm not trying to get long-winded with this discussion, but had we tried to short circuit the process and not let it happen, it wouldn't have happened the way it did. And I think a lot of people, Lori, and I love what you said. You were like, just let this happen. Let this happen. Come on, let this happen. We all find ourselves there, and we don't realize that in life, everything is a process. And it's about, and I love the way you took us and led us in that direction. What was the biggest thing you had to learn about your process through COVID and through working with the coaches that you've worked with?
That people don't care about my stuff. They don't care. They want to know that I know my stuff, but they care about the outcome, everything. And this is what I talk about with people when they're interviewing. Everything's about the employer and what's in it for them. And the same thing with the client, is everything is about them. And while I, believe that, it's still hard when we're trying to create content and post. I still would default to talking too much about my process or whatever, because I thought it was important. I'm like, no one cares. I mean, I have over-explainer-itis, and it's real.
But you
And
know what? People that spend any time with you, this is what I love about you. Anybody that spends any time with you can't help but you are just such a warm person. You're one of the warmest people I know because you always make everybody feel good about themselves. And that's what meek people do, is they defer to the other person, and they understand that it's about making other people feel warm and feel good. And good grief, Lori, if we have ever needed people like yourself in the midst of this pandemic, we need them now more than ever, because we've got too many front-facing people. And I don't want to, and please, if you're listening to this, you're like, I'm a front-facing person. I am too. I am too. And Lori,
Me too.
and Lori is too.
Yeah.
But what I love about my friendship with Lori is she understands how to make people feel good about themselves. And I think that, and that's why I wanted you to do this chapter, because you're when I think of the people that endorse this book, you immediately it was a no-brainer, like, that's her. Why do you think we as a society have lost the ability to make other people feel better about themselves?
I think I had this conversation with someone last year with, all of the political strife and things that were going on, mask, no mask, election. There was just so much negativity. And I think it's really easy, and especially now more than ever with quarantine, where people are just at their keyboards. And I think it's really easy to lash out, to pass judgment. I see it even like in parent boards that I'm on Facebook, where, somebody will ask a question, and then, people are just like, just go after them. And I'm like, well, maybe they are wrong, but, seek to understand. And does that work? Like, when you attack someone, their first defense is going to be to pull back and either fight back or tune you out. And as far as the kindness, kindness is a value of mine. And I think it comes from working. I've always valued it, but I think especially having worked in a toxic business environment where it was not practiced, where it just mentally and physically took a toll. It's at my forefront, and I know how much words matter to me when someone says something kind, when someone does something to lift me up or empower me, that they don't have to say, they don't have to do. And honestly, I'm not as good at it as I would like to be. There's tons of people I owe recommendations to. I completely suck at that. There's just like this long list, but it's something that I try to do as much as possible when my ADD doesn't get in the way. And
that's why you and I are such good friends, because our ADDs are a lot alike. It's scary,
But I don't want to like blame it and say it's okay, because I think, I'm not using that as an excuse, but it does, like, I'm like, squirrel, whatever. And it's like
my mom said that my wife was telling me last night. You'll get a kick out of this. My wife was telling me last night that she talked to my mom, and we're trying to make plans to get together. My mom lives a couple hours away, and we're trying to make plans to get together. And she's telling my mom about my son and his study habits. And my mom said, you realize that my son, your husband, and my grandson, your son, get that from me. And I am like that. I'm like, I've got to put my phone, like when I'm recording podcasts, I've got to put my phone aside, because even when you're talking, if it lights up, I'm like, who is it? Who is it?
Yeah. It's like,
yeah. And that's why you and I are such good friends. But you said something there that I love, and I want to go here for just a few minutes. I think meek people are the antidote to toxic work environments. Meek people have the ability to really understand what they, and you just said it. You said, people don't have to be kind, but they are. People don't have to be encouraging, but they are. And you saw that even in the midst of that environment. I think if you have encouragers, you have meek people that are just, they're humbly docile. You don't know they're there. But when they make an impact, they are the antidote to a toxic environment, because they'll sit back and let everything happen. And then at that particular moment, because of their patience as a strength, they will just go, hey, I want to share with you a kind word. Or, hey, I've got a piece of cake. Would you like to share a piece of cake? And you're smiling. If you're watching on YouTube, Lori's smiling because it's 100. That, to me, that's the antidote of a toxic environment. How were you able to overcome with your strengths that toxic environment and free yourself and go, you know what? I'm out of here because it doesn't align with my values and who I am as a person.
I've learned a lot since then, because, I didn't always handle every situation well. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but that was like my whole entire division was downsized. And so, the situation, luckily in this case, ended for me. And, it was just interesting to see some of my coworkers. I had one of my very good friends that got married, and we got together, and to see everyone like a year later and how much healthier and happier. And just, it was like this weight, like we all acknowledged just how much it had impacted us. And when I went into other roles, there was just, like I worked a contract position, and, people were complaining about this and complaining about that. And I was like, what? I'm not thrilled with this either. We're kind of thrown to the wolves. We're like the ugly, stepchild, kind of cast aside. But I said, relatively speaking, this is pretty good compared to this. It's like, we just need to have some perspective. And the bottom line is, this is what we have to work with. So, we can either do it or not. And I mean, I want to have fun. Fun is one of my values too. I know people probably get tired of me of like, oh my gosh, she always goes through all her values, but it really is. And people,
I love it because, again, listen, I think we all should do a value exercise. I think we all should understand ourselves and what makes us us, what makes us who we are. Because if you don't know what your values are, and I've said this a ton of times, and I probably have said it to you, there's a vast difference between value and appreciation. It's those, it's those things that you hold dear. Why do you think people lock up jewelry in safe deposit boxes or fire boxes in their house? They don't want anything to happen to it. You don't lock up I'm not locking up my hoodies. Okay. I'm not locking up my joggers.
Maybe your favorite one. I mean,
well, but Lori, these things can be replaced.
Exactly.
They can be replaced. And, the valuables are valuables because they're extremely difficult, if not impossible, to replace. And so I love what you said about tapping into your values and constantly just trying to find out. And it should be, I would go a step further. I think you should do it maybe once a year and see what has changed about you, because situations, and I don't mean to give a long-winded thing here, but situations can change how you feel. If people have, people that have lost loved ones to COVID-19, people that have lost jobs.
Sure.
I mean, that can negatively impact you, and it can change the person that you are, and it can change your values overnight, especially if you don't handle it well. I mean, grief is a powerful emotion as it is, but I've got to go here with you for just a quick second. Take me through what you've learned this last year about your values.
I mean, I keep going back to them. I mean, it's always at the forefront. Like I said, when I was, like, gosh, should I just go back to, a corporate job or a sales job, or, give this up? And, I'm like, am I having fun? Am I making a difference? Do I have autonomy, which is also a value, trust, kindness? I mean, all recognition. I mean, actually, recognition is a value of mine, and which is funny because, whoops, my earbuds falling out. Yep, that wasn't in rehearsal.
That only happens to me. That only happens where I'm fidgeting with my ears.
I was like I didn't have it in all the way, I guess. But anyways, I think, those are, and again, it kind of is, like you said, things do change and evolve. I think our core values pretty much are constant, just like our strengths. Strengths can even change if you've had a major life shift or a major role change. I like to think of strengths as the ones that we need most can come forward. So like when I moved from full-time sales to coaching, 3 of my top 5 dropped to my top 10, which was surprising because it was like, wasn't even that far apart, time-wise when I'd taken them. But it was like the ones that maybe, like, the other ones were still there. It wasn't like they went away because our strengths stay fairly stable. But I talked to this a lot with students because, of course, having to think about your values as a teenager or even a college student, I said, this is just something for you. Like, we don't define them, and we do that purposely because what each thing means is relative to you. But you should really give thought to what you need in your life and what you want in a role. And you may not get all of those, but when you rank them, you have to look at what your deal makers and your deal breakers are. And if you're interviewing and all of a sudden, ding, 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 like red flag is going off, that's a deal breaker, it's not going to be a good fit, even if the salary and it's the dream job, because when our values are not honored, we are never going to be happy and fulfilled in that role. And with teens, especially, their values can shift, and I do talk about this too. Like I said, if you have a partner, you have children, what, stability might be more of an issue, or, financial, freedom, all these things, depending on how they define them, those factors might become more important. But I worked with one student whose parents are divorced. Stability was really important for him.
Yeah.
He's even though both parents are very involved and he doesn't feel unloved or anything, it's just that he really values that as a constant in his life. And so I think it's a really good exercise, and where it may not be like the number one thing like it is for adults, where, okay, we really got to make sure we align with these values. I think it's really valuable. And it also is good for looking at the people that they hang out with and associate with, who they have relationships with. I mean, if someone you're involved with romantically for, as a partner is not honoring your values, if they don't respect that, I mean, you're not going to change them. Although, when I was younger, I thought I could change everybody, and that's a whole nother podcast, right? So,
You've been talking to my wife, haven't you?
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Well,
I've learned you can't change someone unless they want to change. But I think when we're younger, we have rose-colored glasses, and we think that if we like someone or love someone, whatever it is, but ultimately that's the other person's responsibility.
I love that. The rose-colored glasses we wear as young people. And we really do. And a lot of times, Lori, we just decide that, that's going to be how things are in life. We're going to take those things. We could go for hours, but what you just said there was so good, and there's nothing I could add to it. I want you, if you don't mind, in true intentional encourager podcast form, leave folks with a piece of intentional encouragement around meekness or whatever is on your mind, whatever's on your heart. Just encourage somebody this morning, as you're gifted at it. I'm telling you, leave the folks with some intentional encouragement.
Everybody has their own unique gifts, and when I think of strengths, gifts that go unwrapped hold us back from achieving our true potential. So discover those gifts. Even if you don't do a strengths assessment, ask a bunch of people that know you well, what are things that you do really well? What things really stand out to them? And make sure they're not a skill. Make sure they're a strength, because a lot of times we do confuse those. And I think that that's where we discount those because we do them naturally, that we don't think they're special. And when you really embrace that, it's really powerful and it's empowering. And I just think we all deserve to feel special, like uniqueness used to be like you were odd or weird. And now it's like, what? I embrace it. I'm a geek. I embrace it.
As well you should.
You have to be. That doesn't mean you have to be. You can be cool, but I just own it.
As well you should. You are the absolute best. Lori Knudsen, remind folks how they can connect with you and all the different places you are and things like that, because people are going to hear this and they're going to want to connect with you. I know they're going to want to connect with you. Tell folks how they can do that.
Probably LinkedIn is the best place. Lori Knudsen, Knudsen, Lori. I forgot to spell that. And or you can reach me at knowbilityconsulting.com, and then Knowbility is spelled Knowbility, consulting.com, and also on Facebook, and then Instagram. I'm just Knudsen LA. I don't have a business account yet, and I'm also on Clubhouse. So.
Knudsen LA. I love it.
Yeah, everybody thinks, I didn't realize that, but it's like Lori Ann because I'm so creative, So
Knudsen LA.
Everybody thinks I'm from LA. And I'm like,
you didn't tell me about the second branch of Knowbility Consulting that you opened in Southern California. Is that?
I did live in Southern California for a brief period, but it was more North County, San Diego, not LA.
Wow. Lori Knudsen, find her LoriKnudsen on LinkedIn. Yes, I'm stumbling over myself. Knowbility Consulting, KNOWBILITY Consulting, CONSULTING, knowbilityconsulting.com. Lori, you are the absolute best. Thank you for joining me on this special edition, the People Buy From People series of the Intentional Encourager podcast.
Bye.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And of course, the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. If you're not subscribed to the Intentional Encourager podcast, hit the subscribe button wherever you get podcasts so you don't miss an exciting episode where you can get encouraged and stay encouraged. And remember, anyone, anywhere, at any time, any place can be an intentional encourager.